So this discussion is about uplifting families, about creating wealth and generating wealth for the long term, especially in the Hispanic community, and that's what Gary's been fighting for decades. And I'm going to start from my favorite topic, which is AI and blockchain. And at the risk of sounding stereotypical, but I've noticed that the Hispanic community usually stays a few years behind on adoption of technology, and this is a world where $15 trillion is being added to the economy in the next 5 years because of AI, and that's AI alone. I didn't even add the crypto component to it, where Bitcoin was being a $2 trillion market cap. What are your thoughts of changing that mindset and getting that community, instead of a couple of years behind, let's get them a couple of years ahead?
Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation to be here. This is a fantastic event. So I'm going to challenge that perception a little bit that Latinos are late to adopt new technologies. I think that perception was created around the time that the internet became a thing. And you needed to have access to the internet. You needed to have a desktop computer. You needed to live in the right neighborhoods and whatnot. So there was really a challenge back then in getting people connected to the internet. That kind of changed when wireless technology took over. And I remember even reading a couple of articles at the time that not only would underserved communities in the US, but also around the world had a chance to collapse timeframes because they didn't have to undo the wired infrastructure that other more first world countries had to do, and they had the chance to really make up a lot of ground. And I think that kind of happened. The one, I think, thing that the Latino population in particular has in its advantage is its youth. So Latinos in the United States are on average 10 years younger than the overall population, 15 years younger than the non-Hispanic white population. So adoption to new technologies today is actually changing. You look at Latino numbers when it comes to social media, when it comes to mobile phone usage, they actually out-index the population today. So to your point, I think there is a tremendous opportunity right now, and I'm certainly trying to convey this message to my network, that AI gives us an even greater chance to close gaps that have historically been there, maybe more than any other technology.
Wow, that's great. I learned something. That's great.
Well, I've learned a lot already this morning.
So, and then NARAP recently put out an economic survey that I think it was talking about how Latinos are leading the way in home ownership, and leading the way in housing. So can you talk about the substance of that report? Yeah,
the Urban Institute actually put out a report a couple of years ago that estimated that 70% of net new homeowners over the next 20 years will be Latino nationwide, right? So that's huge, right? And so if you're in the housing space, if you're in the mortgage space, if you're in the real estate space, if you want to be in business in 5 years, you better pay attention to this market segment, quite frankly. But again, a lot of that has to do with the youth of the Latino population. So the average age of a Latino is about 30 years old, just starting to enter those prime home buying years. Plus, if you know anything about Latino culture, you know how important the family is to Latino culture. The home is the centerpiece of the family experience. So the desire for home ownership amongst the Latino community also tends to out-index the overall population. So they have the desire, they are right at the right age. Now it's all about affordability and sort of closing the gap in terms of access.
Excellent. And I know today there's a lot of senior NARAP realtors here in the audience.
Are we here? I see a few.
Yeah. So, and there's still a lot of work to be done in building wealth in Latino and other minority communities. What's your direction and advice to your leadership that's here and how they can move that forward?
Well, first of all, it's my personal opinion that the primary challenge that the country is facing isn't really about our political divide, isn't really about a lot of the things that we see in the media every day. I think the wealth gaps that we have in this country are really driving a lot of the discomfort out there for many, many Americans. So closing that wealth gap, I think we all have a stake in seeing that happen. If you just look at the demographic numbers and you see that we are, rapidly becoming a country that's even more diverse and is actually becoming a majority diverse community, the fact is that the country cannot maintain its leadership in the global economy if those diverse communities aren't also thriving. So it's important for, I think, minority communities, the wealth building concept, but I also think it's important for the whole country. The whole country has a stake in this. Fortunately, I like to joke, and it's not really a joke, that Latino immigrants don't come to this country because they love our food or our music or our fashion. They come to this country for one reason and one reason only, and that's economic opportunity, right? The opportunity to create a better life for themselves and their families. And the acquisition of homeownership is that cornerstone of the American dream for many, many Latino families. So there's reason to be optimistic, but I don't think those gaps are going to close by themselves. It's going to take people like you and people like the folks in this audience that are going to be essential in closing those gaps in the future.
Excellent. So what's your advice or recommendations to the Trump administration on improving, increasing housing accessibility, affordability? And then the follow-up question to that is, I think there was recent statements that they are going to move forward in privatizing Freddie and Fannie. And how do you feel that would help or hurt?
Well, okay, so I'll try to take those on one at a time. The affordability issue, and I hate to oversimplify issues because there's nothing that is, due to one thing, but the affordability issue is really a factor of housing inventory and the lack thereof. The fact that there's just not enough affordable housing stock in the marketplace today. So that is number one. And I do think that the Trump administration has communicated signals that they get this. And, given the fact that the president is a real estate guy for all intents and purposes, I think there's probably reason to be optimistic in that regard, which is good. That is half of the equation. The other half of the equation is then access. And I think this is where you come in and people like you, which is the underwriting criteria that the mortgage banking industry has used for the last 50 years has not changed a whole lot. Right? So we still look at W-2s and pay stubs and so forth. The fact is our economy has changed dramatically. The gig economy is here to stay. I like to joke that Latinos actually invented the gig economy. Man, we've been doing the gig thing for a long, long time. But understanding and I think measuring capacity, the capacity to repay does need to be readdressed. And I do think that's where AI, that's where new technologies can start to identify new metrics, and we can become much more, I think, predictive and accurate in really finding people that maybe today, because they're self-employed, aren't qualifying for mortgages, but truly are ready and capable of being successful homeowners. And
last question, almost out of time, but it's a loaded question.
Okay.
So do you agree with the president's position on telling the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates and as a tool to boost housing?
As somebody that has been part of this industry for a long time, I know that the Federal Reserve does not really have the ability to impact mortgage rates directly. The Federal Reserve controls short-term rates, overnight rates. Mortgage rates are more tied to the 10-year Treasury bill, which is more market-driven. So I do think focusing on inflation, lowering inflation is going to have a bigger impact in lowering those rates for the long term. And I think people like you and I, we don't necessarily support a lot of artificial stimuli, right? I believe in market-based solutions because those are the solutions that are going to last and are sustainable. So I don't have a big opinion of that. Maybe some people will benefit from short-term interest rates being lowered, but we know in the mortgage business it's more complex than that.
I think I can squeeze one last question in. So what about housing assistance programs and down payment assistance programs? Do you think the administration could be doing more on that front?
Well, okay, so I have mixed, feelings about that as well, because, you look at home ownership, or I should say down payment, is really, if you survey a lot of potential first-time home buyers, that is a primary barrier to home ownership for many, many families. So anything that you can do to help close that gap or improve that barrier is going to be helpful. The thing is that down payment assistance, unless there is some market-based benefit that comes from that, is only anecdotal. It's not going to solve the problem in a macro basis, right? Unless we can find a way to make it more profitable for companies, both public and private, to benefit from that. If we can do that, then I think absolutely. But if it's just still kind of charity thing, you're going to help a handful of people, but you're not necessarily going to move the needle forward a whole lot.
Amazing. Any last words of wisdom for, especially for
So Fannie Mae and
policymakers?
Freddie Mac, I didn't answer that question. Privatizing it, it's probably time. Those of us in the industry know how important it is to have a robust secondary mortgage market, how much that is really tied to investor trust, right? So the government completely backing away from the secondary mortgage market does raise concerns for those of us that have been in the business for a long time. However, I think the market is ready for innovation. It's ready for new influx of capital. I think this is still the best, nation in the world to make capital investments. So, I think it is something that has to happen. We just have to be very careful on how that's executed.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you so much. It's great to be here. This is a really great thing that you're doing, by the way. Congratulations.